Well, it's time to take a trip down memory lane again and revisit our nostalgia section here on Pirate Videos. These days we're all used to seeing the likes of Tony Ricardson and lately, of course, Lee Adams as international stars around Wimborne Road. But it hasn't always been like that. In fact, I can remember a time when there were no established world-class stars in the Pirates lineup.
Yes, of course, there were stars in the local eyes, but they weren't established world-class performers, not wearing the blue and white of Poole Pirates. Crutchett was a world star, but he'd moved on before he really started to crash into the world stage. So that it would be safe, I think, to say of modern times, in world-class status, Malcolm Simmons was probably the first pirate.
Malcolm Simmons came to Poole from King's Lynn via West Ham, and it was Dave Lanning who undoubtedly gave him his biggest break by putting him on a bike and giving him his first rides at Custom House.
Yes, he'd come through the very, very successful and booming Kent grass track scene as a junior rider, as a schoolboy. He'd had a sort of a season at Hackney the year before, in 1963, when I think he was only about 16 or 17. But 64 was the year, you'll recall, when we had the big split in Speedway, and that what was then the British League stayed with the control board, and the provincial league, which Hackney had taken part in, went unlicensed. Now, Malcolm was forced into a corner because as a grass track rider, he couldn't afford to lose his license. So he was painted into a corner, and he came to West Ham, which was his nearest track from where he lived in Sittingbourne Way, and came to us. I was then the deputy manager at West Ham. I knew a bit about him, and he said, could he please have a ride? And we put him in the second halves at Custom House. And I can always remember in those early days, they called him Sparky, because they used to have the old steel shoes, and they used to spread some kind of gear on it to stop them sparking. And Malcolm either didn't have it or couldn't afford it, but he rode with an untreated steel shoe. And he looked like Halley's Comet as he was going around, because there had a trail of sparks going out behind him. And he sort of got himself into the West Ham side of that year, 1964, when that was Bjorn Knutson and Bent Janssen, Reg Luckhurst, Norman Hunter. He got in the back end and developed startlingly quickly. And clearly he was a prospect. And from obscurity, virtual obscurity, by the end of the 64 season, he'd established himself in quite a lively side. West Ham was doing sensational business. We were getting 12,000 people a week in then. And he picked up in a side which had started with virtually nothing, but ended up in the cup final, the knockout cup final. And Malcolm was part of that side and clearly had a future ahead of him.
Malcolm Simmons left West Ham rated as the best second string in the country. He went to King's Lynn, where he then blossomed as a heat leader too. And when he came to Poole, he finally really emerged onto the international scene and became a superstar.
I think you have to regard Malcolm Simmons as one of the most naturally gifted motorcyclists that Britain has ever produced, and I really mean that seriously. And he really was perfectly balanced. He was a good all-rounder. He wasn't a particularly fast starter, but he very rarely missed a start completely. But he had complete control of a motorcycle. He was naturally gifted. And at Poole, he really was invincible, virtually invincible. And we're talking at a time when there were a lot of giants around, a lot of big names. But Malcolm really was the cat's pajamas for a while there. And I mean, when he got into world finals, and I remember vividly, one of my enduring memories of world finals, of doing a commentary for ITV in Katowice in 1976, when he came pretty close to winning the title. That was Peter Collins' year, and the British boys then were really on the four-valve revolution, and were head and shoulders above everybody, and PC was the crown prince. Everybody tended to overlook Malcolm Simmons and just how good he was. And in fact, it was one of the great World Championship final races that Collins beat Malcolm Simmons. And I remember, I think it was Heat 6, it was their second ride, and Malcolm was in front, and Peter Collins switched back going over the start line at Chorzo, and it was an absolutely blinding manoeuvre. He came from there and switched back inside Malcolm, and there's a wonderful shot of Malcolm Simmons glancing inside and realising he's left a hole for PC. And I remember now saying, that was poetry on wheels. And Malcolm, there was nobody else in that world final that looked remotely in his class apart from Peter Collins. He was a bit unlucky in a way that he was at his peak when there were other great riders at their peak. But I would honestly say this, that I think Malcolm Simmons was every bit as good as Peter Collins and had really a better record. Peter Collins was very good the next year, 1977, but Malcolm was there or thereabouts for another 4 or 5 seasons. I certainly think he was as good a speedway rider of his generation as any of them as an Englishman.
Well, there was disappointment for the Poole fans in 1976 when they really thought that was Simo's year. But there was still plenty to celebrate, as Malcolm went on to win an unprecedented 3 World Pairs titles with different partners.
Yes, he was very impressive in the World Pairs, Nigel. We've got to remember also he was a member of the World Cup winning squad, I think on 2 or 3 occasions. Certainly I remember one race in Germany, in Norden. He got the most fantastic start. He must have gone 10 yards before anybody moved. And everybody said that was the most brilliant piece of technical balance. And I remember we won a World Cup in Poland, and the trophy he had was made out of coal. So he distinguished himself at individual, at pairs, and at team level. He was a great all-rounder.
On the individual front, Malcolm also made the blue riband almost his own property as he went on to win, again, an unprecedented 4 times.
Yes, you've got to remember that the blue riband, in many ways, was more tougher than a world final because it was a hand-picked, selected 16 top stars. Now, a world final, you tended to get a few Eastern European rabbits and quite a few pushovers. The blue riband, there were no gifts. There were no gifts. It was a tough field, and it gave the Poole fans the opportunity to see their boy in against the best stars and beating them out of sight. And that really is very special.
In short, all of Simo's exploits at Poole made him the darling of the crowd for 5 years.
Malcolm Simmons was a giant. He was a track giant. He would rank in the best 10 English riders in 75 years, in my opinion, and certainly probably in the best 25 in the world that I've seen, and I've seen most of them since the war. He was a giant.
Malcolm, number 2, can't be too bad.
Oh, it's nearly what I wanted, not far off, is it? I'm very happy with this.
But just a little bit sticky earlier on, perhaps, just a couple of vital points you dropped.
Nerves, I think. Maybe. Probably.
Sandra, how do you feel now?
Oh, just great.
Well, I think we're going to drink Kanowici Dry tonight, lads. Very well done. Peter Collins, world champion. Malcolm Simmons, world number 2. A fantastic day for English Speedway.